My name is Linda Parker. I was 35 years old last Christmas. I stood on my sister's porch with my children. My hands clutched a warm casserole and a bag of handmade gifts. I never imagined that in a few minutes we would be turned away like strangers. The air was sharp and cold. It slipped under my coat and settled deep in my bones. Beside me, Sophie held the package she had painted herself. Her small, mittened hands clung to it like it was the most important thing in the world. Ethan shifted nervously. His breath rose in little clouds as he searched my face. He wanted to know if this visit was really safe. I looked at the front door. It was framed in perfect evergreen garlands and glowing white lights. It looked like a picture from a magazine, a place that promised warmth and belonging. But as we waited there, a tight ache grew in my chest. Even before the door opened, part of me already knew this Christmas wouldn't heal any old wounds. I was 35 that winter. Even after everything that had happened, part of me still believed in family. I wanted so badly for my children to feel they belonged somewhere. As I stood there holding the casserole, I thought about the years that brought me to this doorstep. There were so many nights I lay awake in our small apartment. I would listen to the old heater rattle and wonder how I would pay the bills. After Tom left, it felt like the world had shrunk around me. I spent countless evenings at the kitchen table. I sorted through unpaid notices and whispered that I could handle it all alone. Sophie and Ethan never saw me cry. I saved my tears for when they were asleep. I told them thrift store blankets were special 'cause I said so, and standing in front of Carol's perfect house that morning, I wished none of our history mattered. Just once, I wanted a day when we could be a family. A day when nothing felt broken. Still, every night after the kids went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table. I wrapped little gifts in reused paper. I curled leftover bits of ribbon. Sophie helped me bake sugar cookies. She pressed the star-shaped cutter into the dough, her face serious. Ethan sprinkled too much red sugar on every tray. His tongue poked out as he worked. We painted mugs with simple designs. Flowers for Carol, stripes for Mark. I told the kids it didn't matter that the gifts weren't expensive. What mattered was that we thought about the people we loved. Sometimes Sophie looked up from her project. "Do you think Aunt Carol will like these?" she would ask. I always nodded, but each time my stomach tightened. I needed to believe our effort would be enough to open her door. The night before Christmas, I sat in the living room. The small, artificial tree glowed softly. It was only 4 feet tall. It leaned a little to the side. Still, it felt like a victory. Every ornament told a story. It leaned a little to the side. Still, it felt like a victory. Every ornament told a story. Paper snowflakes Sophie had cut with dull scissors. Tiny pine cones Ethan painted gold. A popcorn garland we strung together while watching old cartoons. I sank onto the couch. My body was too tired to cry. For a moment I imagined Carol's house. The vaulted ceilings, the elegant garlands, the rooms that always smelled clean and bright. Then I shook my head. It didn't matter. What mattered was 2 small bedrooms down the hall, the children sleeping under thrift store quilts. They still believed tomorrow could be magical. I clung to that hope as tightly as I could. When morning came, Sophie and Ethan rushed into the living room. Their voices were bright with excitement. They went straight to their stockings, little hands searching for the surprises I had hidden. Sophie found her colored pencils. "You remember the blue ones?" she squealed, hugging me tight. Ethan unwrapped a plastic dinosaur. He held it up in triumph. We shared cinnamon rolls I baked from a can. For a little while, the room felt warm and safe. No one thought about bills. No one remembered the cold porch waiting for us. I sat on the worn carpet and watched them unwrap their gifts. Even if it all fell apart later, they would have this moment. A memory of joy, something no one could take away. After breakfast, I helped them into their best clothes. Sophie wore the red velvet dress we found at the thrift store. I washed it twice to chase away the musty smell. She twirled in front of the mirror. Her hair curled gently around her shoulders. Ethan tugged at his green sweater. "It's scratchy," he complained, but he didn't take it off. He knew today was special. I pinned a little silver clip in Sophie's hair. It had been mine when I was her age. For a second, our eyes met in the mirror. Hope and fear mixed together. When I slipped into my blue sweater dress, I studied my reflection. I told myself we were ready. Maybe this time things would be different. The casserole dish was warm in my hands as we walked to the car. Sophie cradled her gift in her lap, careful not to crush the ribbon. Ethan climbed into his seat without a word. His face was solemn. I forced my voice to sound light. Remember I said we'll thank Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark. We'll be polite. We'll smile. Sophie nodded. Her eyes stayed fixed on the snow-dusted houses outside. I hope Aunt Carol likes my mug, she whispered. She will, I promised quickly. But inside, something heavy stirred. As we turned onto Carol's street, the houses looked grander than ever. Every window glowed with perfect lights. Every door wore a perfect wreath. It felt like driving into a world I could never quite reach. Carol's house glowed in the gray morning. White lights outlined every corner. 2 matching wreaths hung on the big front door. Ethan pressed his nose to the glass. It's like a Christmas castle, he whispered. His breath left little circles on the window. I parked and turned to face them. All right, I said, smoothing my dress. Remember to use your good manners. Sophie clutched her gift tighter. Ethan stared at the shining house, his eyes wide. I opened my door. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Even then, some quiet voice warned me no amount of good manners would change what waited behind that door. We walked up the stone path. Snow crunched under our boots. I balanced the casserole carefully. My hands were starting to tremble. Through the tall windows, I could see people moving inside. Everyone looked relaxed. Laughter rose in warm waves. Sophie stopped and looked up. Should I ring the bell? She whispered. I nodded. Go ahead, sweetheart. Her mitten pressed the button. A soft chime echoed through the house. We waited. Music drifted through the crack at the door's edge. My chest tightened. I tried to tell myself we belonged here, that this was still family. But my heart was already bracing for the answer. We stood in the cold. My breath came out in sharp little puffs. After a long moment, I saw the curtain by the door move. Carol's face appeared behind the glass. Her eyes met mine, flat, careful. I lifted my hand and tried to smile. She didn't wave. She didn't nod. The curtain fell back into place. A few seconds later, the lock clicked. The door opened just a crack. Carol stood there. Her cream sweater looked soft, expensive. Her hair was smooth and perfect. She didn't look happy to see us. She didn't look sad either, just tired of pretending. Merry Christmas, I managed. My voice felt thin in the cold. I shifted the casserole higher in my arms. We brought the sweet potato casserole, I said quickly. And the cookies. The kids made a few things, just little gifts. Carol looked at the bundle. She didn't open the door any wider. One hand rested on the edge of the door, steady and firm. Behind her, warm light spilled across polished floors. I caught a glimpse of Mark laughing with someone. Sophie stepped forward. Hi, Aunt Carol, she whispered. For a moment, Carol's eyes softened, then her mouth tightened again. Her face became a wall I couldn't reach over. Today's not a good day for your kind of energy, Carol said. Her voice was soft, almost polite, but it cut deeper than any shout. I blinked. I don't understand, I stammered. David said you were expecting us. It's Christmas. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It's just not a good time, she repeated. Ethan's voice broke the quiet. But we brought presents, he whispered. He looked down at the box in his hands. Something in me cracked. I opened my mouth to beg her not to do this, but she just shook her head. Sophie stepped forward. Her mittened hand lifted the little gift. I made this for you, she said softly. Carol glanced at the mug, but she didn't reach for it. That's very nice, Sophie, she murmured. Maybe another time. I swallowed hard. The casserole felt heavier in my arms. Ethan tugged my coat. Mom, he whispered. Can't we go inside? I hear Aiden. Behind Carol, the house glowed warm and golden. All those voices laughing untouched by us. I tried one last time. Please, I said. My voice was almost gone, but Carol didn't move. I don't understand, I whispered, though part of me did. Carol looked me straight in the eye. I think it's better if you come another day. The air went thin. My ears rang. Sophie pressed against my leg. Ethan gripped my hand so tight it hurt. Carol's face didn't change. Merry Christmas, she said softly. Then she closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide back into place. For a moment I couldn't move. My heart thudded so hard it made me dizzy. The porch was silent. Just the cold and my children's quiet breathing. We stood there in the cold, the casserole cooling in my arms. The gifts suddenly felt like stones. Sophie looked up, her cheeks pink with wind. Mommy, she whispered, why doesn't Aunt Carol want us to come in? I opened my mouth. No words came. All I could think was that this was my fault, that somehow I'd earned this rejection. Ethan sniffed. Did we do something wrong? His voice was so small it made my chest ache. I looked at their hopeful faces. I knew I couldn't let them see how much this was breaking me. They needed me to be strong even if I was only pretending. I crouched down so I could meet their eyes. My breath came out in shaky puffs. No, sweethearts, I said. My voice was calm, though my heart wasn't. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you. Sophie looked down at her gift. Her shoulders slumped. Ethan pressed closer to my side. Sometimes I whispered grown-ups make choices that don't make sense, but that doesn't mean you aren't loved. They nodded, but I could tell they didn't really believe me. I stood up slowly, feeling every ounce of disappointment settle in my bones. I shifted the casserole to one arm and took Ethan's small package in my free hand. Come on, I said gently. Let's go make our own Christmas. We walked back to the car in silence. Sophie watched her boots sink into the snow. Ethan held my hand so tight it hurt. When I opened the car door, the warm air rushed out to meet us. I set the casserole on the passenger seat and took a breath. In the rearview mirror, I saw their faces. Confused, sad, still hoping this was all a mistake. I couldn't let the silence swallow us. You know what, I began softly. I think we deserve a special Christmas adventure. Just the three of us. Ethan looked up curious but cautious, like what I forced to smile. Like pancakes. The biggest, sweetest pancakes in the whole city. Ethan's eyes lifted. A tiny spark of hope flickered behind the hurt. With chocolate chips, he asked. With chocolate chips, I promised, and whipped cream. Anything you want. Sophie wiped her cheek with her mitten. She held her gift like it was the last piece of something good. Can we open our presents there? She whispered. Yes, I said. We'll open them at the table. I started the car, my hands trembling just a little. As we pulled away, I looked back once. The house glowed perfect in the gray morning. People inside were still laughing, still warm. I told myself I wouldn't look back again. We drove through quiet streets. The radio stayed off. I couldn't stand to hear any cheerful music. Sophie traced shapes on the fogged window. Ethan swung his feet in small, restless kicks. When we passed a diner with a neon sign that read, Ruby's open all day, something eased inside me. Look, I said, pointing. Ruby's is open. What do you think about pancakes? Sophie turned from the window. Her eyes were still red, but curious. Ethan leaned forward, hopeful. Can we really get whipped cream too? He asked. All the toppings, I promised. Today we can have whatever we want. I pulled into the parking lot. Snow fell softly onto the windshield. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled like coffee and syrup. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling. A little Christmas tree blinked in the corner. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. Merry Christmas, she called. I nodded. Just the three of us, I said quietly. She led us to a booth by the window. The red vinyl seats were cracked but clean. Sophie slid in first. She smoothed her dress over her knees. Ethan climbed beside her, pressing both hands on the table to feel the warmth. I sat across from them. My heart was still heavy, but here no one looked at us like we didn't belong. Maybe that was enough. The waitress placed 3 menus on the table. She bent down with a kind smile. Our Christmas special is gingerbread pancakes with cinnamon butter, she said, and Santa left candy canes for all the good kids. She pulled 2 bright candy canes from her apron pocket. Ethan's eyes went wide. Sophie held hers carefully as if it might break. Thank you, I whispered. My voice was rough. She only nodded like she understood everything I couldn't say. For a moment, I watched them. Ethan tapped his candy cane against the table. Sophie turned hers slowly in her hands. A little warmth seeped into my chest. We were here. We were together. That had to be enough. While the kids studied their menus, I excused myself. In the bathroom, the mirror was streaked with old cleaner. I braced my hands on the sink and looked at my reflection. I looked older than 35. My eyes were swollen. My hair was flat under my knit cap. I let the tears come quiet and hot. Not just for me. For Sophie standing on that porch with her little gift. For Ethan asking if he'd done something wrong. I pressed a damp towel to my face. My chest hurt. Later, I could fall apart all I wanted. But not now. They needed me to be strong, even if it was only pretend. When I came back, Sophie was peeling the plastic from her candy cane. Ethan was telling the waitress about his dinosaur toys. His voice was small but steadier than before. I slid into the booth and set my hands on the warm table. "What did you decide?" I asked. My voice was soft but steady. Sophie looked up. "We want to share," she said. "One chocolate chip, one gingerbread." I nodded. "That sounds perfect." The waitress scribbled the order. She winked at Ethan. I watched them settle back. Their shoulders eased. The strain in their faces began to fade. Maybe it wasn't the Christmas I imagined, but it was still ours. While we waited, I reached into my bag. I pulled out the little gifts I had hidden. The packages felt lighter here, like no one would judge how simple they were. Sophie's eyes widened. "We can open them now." "Yes," I said. "Why not?" She unwrapped her sketchbook. She held it against her chest, her hand resting over the cover. Ethan tore open his paper. He pulled out a set of dinosaur figures. He lined them up carefully. For a moment, the diner felt like home. No cold porch, no locked door, just us making something good out of the day. I watched them. My heart felt tender and raw, but also grateful. The pancakes arrived stacked high. Powdered sugar drifted over the top like fresh snow. Sophie's eyes went wide. Ethan let out a small laugh. The sound made something in me ease. "Dig in," I told them. "This is our Christmas feast." They didn't wait. Syrup pooled on the plates. Whipped cream melted in sweet clouds. I sipped the hot coffee the waitress left for me. It wasn't fancy, but it was strong. It warmed me from the inside out. When I looked up, Sophie was smiling. Not polite or careful, just real. That was worth everything it took to get here. While they ate, I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed with missed calls and messages. Most were from David. My stomach tightened as I read the last text. "Where are you? Carol says you canceled. Call me." I set the phone down. My hand trembled. So Carol hadn't just turned us away. She'd told everyone I chose not to come. I looked at my children. Their faces were soft again, free of confusion. I didn't want to drag them back into hurt, but I couldn't let that lie sit like a stone. I picked up the phone. My heart beat too fast. If I could clear this up, I had to try. I stepped into the corner by the Christmas tree. The lights blinked slow and gentle. My thumb hovered over David's name. I pressed call before I lost my nerve. He answered fast. "Linda, what's going on?" "We were there," I whispered. We stood on the porch. Carol told us to leave. Silence. A long breath on the line. "She said you canceled, that the kids were sick." "No," I said. My voice was steady now. She looked at me and shut the door. I heard something break in his sigh. "I'm sorry. I don't know why she'd do that." "Me neither," I whispered. My hand shook as I ended the call. When I came back to the table, Sophie was licking syrup from her fingers. Ethan hummed to himself as he moved his dinosaurs. I sat down slowly. No matter how many times I replayed it, I couldn't make sense of Carol's choice. Ethan looked up and grinned. "Mom, I saved you a bite." He held out a fork with a piece of pancake. "Thank you," I said. The sweetness almost hurt. Maybe this was what mattered most. Not perfect houses, not perfect stories. Just this. A child offering kindness when the world felt cold. My phone buzzed again. I turned it over. David's name lit the screen. I stepped away once more. My heart felt heavy as I answered. "She admitted you were there," he said quietly. I asked her straight out. I closed my eyes. My throat tightened. "Did she say why?" "She said she was overwhelmed. She thought you'd judge her." "Judge her?" My voice cracked. "For what?" He hesitated. "They're in trouble, Linda. Mark lost his job. She left the firm. They're behind on everything." I didn't speak. The perfect sister I envied was falling apart, and she'd rather shut me out than be seen. I went back to the booth and sat down. My mind was a storm of questions. I thought about her face behind the door, how she couldn't meet my eyes. Sophie leaned against my arm. Her eyelids drooped with tiredness. Ethan lined up his toys in perfect rows. I looked at them and knew what I had to do. This wasn't about pride or proving I was right. It was about showing them what forgiveness looked like, even when it felt impossible. "Would you two like to see Uncle David?" I asked softly. Sophie looked up. "Will he come here?" "Yes," I said. "I think he will." David arrived 20 minutes later. He carried a small paper bag of gifts. He looked tired, but when he saw the kids, he smiled. "Hey, you two," he said. He ruffled Ethan's hair. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," Ethan chirped. I stood as David set the bag on the table. We looked at each other. "I'm sorry," he said. "She shouldn't have done that." I nodded. My throat burned. "I don't understand her." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But maybe she doesn't either." We sat down together, 4 people trying to make something whole again. While the kids unwrapped their gifts, David told me the rest. How Carol was months behind on payments, how she kept up appearances even as everything fell apart. She was always proud, he said. She couldn't stand anyone seeing her fail. I thought of the porch, her careful voice, the way she looked past me. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. David's eyes were gentle. "Maybe you already are. You showed up. You stayed." I picked up my coffee. It was cold now, but I held it anyway. Sometimes the people who hurt you are the ones who are hurting most. The kids were laughing now. Sophie showed David her sketchbook. Ethan leaned against me, warm and sleepy. I thought about driving home, closing the curtains, letting the day end in silence, but that felt like letting fear win. "Do you think she'd talk to me if I went back?" I asked. David paused. "I think she'd listen. She's not as strong as she wants you to believe." I watched snow drift past the window. Maybe it wouldn't change anything, but maybe it would. "Will you stay here with them?" I asked. He nodded. "Of course." I kissed Sophie's hair. I squeezed Ethan's shoulder before stepping back into the cold. Snow fell harder now, softening the world into something quiet. I sat behind the wheel. My hands rested on the steering wheel. My breath fogged the windshield. Part of me wanted to drive home and never look back, but I kept seeing my children's faces when the door closed. They deserved more than bitterness. I started the engine. A slow calm settled in my chest. Even if nothing changed, I had to tell Carol the truth. She had hurt us, but we were still here, still willing to try. Carol's street was nearly empty when I pulled up. The cars were gone. The lights still glowed behind the curtains. I walked up the path, my boots sinking into fresh snow. This time I didn't carry gifts, only the weight of everything unsaid. I rang the bell. My heart beat so hard it hurt. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. Carol stood there. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped. "Linda," she whispered. I swallowed. My voice was steady. "Can we talk?" She looked like she might close the door again, but instead, she stepped back. "Come in," she said softly. The house felt quiet now. Empty plates and crumpled napkins littered the tables. Carol led me to the kitchen. She sank into a chair. "I'm sorry," she said before I could speak. "I don't know why I did that." I sat across from her. "You do know," I said gently. "You were scared." Her eyes filled. She stared at her hands. "Everything is falling apart," she whispered. "Mark lost his job. My practice isn't working. I can't bear anyone seeing me fail. I thought of my own nights counting bills alone. I understand that more than you think I said." She wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "I never meant to hurt the kids." "You didn't just hurt me," I said. My voice was quiet but sure. Sophie was so proud of her gift. Ethan just wanted to see his cousins. Carol closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. "I know. I hate myself for it." I took a slow breath. The anger hadn't vanished, but it felt smaller than the sadness. "I didn't come here to fight," I said. "I came because I don't want this to be how our story ends." She looked up, her face raw. "I don't either." For a moment, we sat in the quiet. "We can't fix everything today," I whispered. "But we can start by telling the truth." Carol nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll call David. I'll tell him everything." I studied her face. For years I thought she was untouchable. Now she just looked tired. "I can't solve it all," I said. "But maybe I can talk to Stephen about your lease." Her mouth fell open. "After all this, you'd help me?" I shrugged. "We're still family. Our kids deserve to see us try." She looked down at her hands. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," I said. "But you have it anyway." When I stood to leave, Carol reached out. She pulled me into a hug. Her shoulders shook as she cried. For a moment, everything old between us fell away. Just 2 sisters trying to be brave. "Where are the kids?" she asked as she stepped back. "With David," I said. "At Ruby's diner." Her voice was small. "Would it be all right if we joined you? I thought of Sophie's face on the porch." Then her smile in the diner. "Yes," I said, "but you'll have to tell them you're sorry." "I will," Carol promised. As I stepped back into the cold, I felt something like relief. Back at the diner, Sophie and Ethan were curled next to David. They showed him their toys, their voices soft and bright. When I walked in, they looked up. Hope flickered in their eyes. "Is Aunt Carol coming?" Sophie asked. "Yes," I said. I crouched beside her. "She wants to say she's sorry." Ethan leaned against me. "Does that mean we can still have Christmas?" I kissed the top of his head. "It means we can try." A few minutes later, Carol walked in. She carried the box of gifts we left behind. If you've ever felt like the door closed on you, you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest conversations can heal the deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to our story.